To me, a cult classic is something that's a bit niche that has a hardcore devoted audience. A lot of the times it's a piece of media that's more of a deep cut, not so much consumed by the mass audience, and tends to verge more on the weirder side of things. The following for the cult classic usually starts as more of an underground thing, but as the passion of the diehards grows, this love often leaks out to a wider audience, sometimes acquiring mainstream appeal. In my eyes, the ultimate cult classic Real Housewife is Alex McCord, OG of the NYC, who starred on the show from seasons 1 to 4. She was not all that popular in her initial run on the show, yet as time has marched on, it seems as if a shift has occurred, and as a day one member of the Hive's Hive, I've been pleasantly surprised to see the love for Miss McCord grow louder, culminating in absolute fanfare when it was announced that she would be a cast member on Ultimate Girls Trip Morocco Edition. As of now, we're kind of in a limbo period waiting to hear if we'll ever get to see this season, but with multiple lawsuits now surrounding the situation, it's looking pretty grim. So I wanted to give Alex her flowers and take a look at Alex's time on the show, paying special attention on why she's reached this cult classic status. So let's start by taking a look at her era, starting with her first, which I'm deeming aspiring socialite. Alex introduced herself as a girl from small-town Kansas. We later learned that there's a lot more to this story, but she was presented as this quaint girl that moved to the big city to really make something of her life. She's accompanied at all times by her husband Simon, an Australian hotelier. They almost function as Siamese twins, which will become a problem later on, but we'll get to that. The two had met online and been inseparable ever since their second date, going on to get married, buy a townhouse in Brooklyn, and have two boys, Francois and Johan. They're very focused on their parenting, with a big journey for them this season being getting their oldest, Francois, into a preschool. I'm totally obsessed with the insanity that is the New York City education system, so I was like, yes, please more, give me these preschool admission scenes. A running theme of Alex and Simon, the two come off very pretentious when it comes to their children. I mean, their names are Johan and Francois. A running gag is that they make Francois speak French a lot of the time, especially when they're in their preferred vacation spot of St. Bart's, despite Francois seeming to have little to no interest in doing so.
C'est quoi en français, François?
Apple.
En français?
Apple juice.
We never got word on if Johan was forced to speak Dutch or whatever, but that would have been a nice touch. But yeah, the child rearing stuff, while providing a lot of material for Bethenny comedy,
Francois is working at the UN this summer. He's doing an internship.
definitely came off a little try-hard. Speaking of which, a big focus for the two is breaking out into New York society. Or focus isn't the right word, it's an obsession, at least as it's presented to us. People they encounter are reduced to potential connections, while parties in the Hamptons function as an office space of sorts in their quest to break into higher and higher status social circles. They become members of the Metropolitan Opera, maybe partly because they enjoy opera, but mostly because it's a great place to be photographed and meet the quote-unquote right people. What's striking about all this chatter is just how open they are about it. There's a shamelessness, a lack of awareness that this should stay a thought, not to be spoken out loud. I'd imagine that nearly every Real Housewife of New York ever has had similar desires and wanting to be popular and go to cool events and all that. I mean, Jill Zarin was on this same cast, but they have no sense to play coy about this whole thing. They would fight this charge a bit at the reunion, saying that a lot of this was editing and they're not as society-obsessed as they were made out to be. But we do hear directly from their mouths the absolute glee they felt over Alex being in the style section of the New York Times, or at least her back.
And what a very beautiful back it is too.
With the other ladies, Alex is definitely the outsider. Some things are surface level, such as her being a bit younger than the others and living in Brooklyn. But she's also the only one that had no pre-show connections. The rest of the other ladies were at the very least tennis friends or had seen each other out socially. So there was some pretense of this whole thing being organic, but with Alex it was clear that she was only around the others as they were cast on the same show. She wouldn't even meet Ramona until a good deal through the first season. She did somewhat connect with Bethenny, with Alex finding B incredibly funny. Oh, how we miss those days. Alex and Jill are also a social match made in heaven at first, since Alex was so openly looking for connections, and Jill took pride in being a connector. They bond right off the bat when Jill hears that they are going through the private school admissions process, and Jill offers to set them up on a private tour of the school that her friend just opened. Jill likes the underdog, as Ramona would so famously say, and likes taking people under her wing. And Alex was that baby bird looking for a home. Luann also really takes to her, being impressed with Alex's ability to speak Italian. This is season 1, and the ladies are still enamored by the Countess's title, so it seems like Jill, and to a much lesser extent Bethenny, are a little miffed by how much Luann enjoys Alex. One wrench for Alex socially is the Simon of it all. Remember that the two are absolutely attached at the hip, so it doesn't even seem to occur to him that some outings should just feature Alex. Bethenny and Jill are a little weirded out when Simon joins Alex at a fashion show, with B paying close attention to Simon massaging her shoulders mid-show. But they would soon learn if you don't want Simon rubbing Alex's shoulders, don't sit him behind her. Bethenny and Jill are also picking up on Alex's pretentiousness, chalking it up to nerves and insecurity. Bethenny is kind of pulled in two directions regarding Alex. It seems like one-on-one they really connect. They have plans to go to a health food expo, and like 5 minutes before they start filming, Bethenny breaks up with her boyfriend, Jason #1. It's here that we first see Alex being a really great listening ear for Bethenny, something that will come up throughout their time together on the show. Alex has a real empathy and wisdom to her, a trait that would be further on display in future seasons. But Bethenny is also really put off by Simon, finding him a bit sleazy and thinking it's weird that he's always showing up with Alex everywhere. But nobody is more put off by Simon than Miss Ramona Singer, who makes no bones about how weird she thinks he is like the second she meets him. To be fair, he did show up to a girls' dinner, which all of the ladies found a bit questionable, but Ramona is like openly hostile towards him immediately.
I'm Simon.
Hey.
Nice to meet you.
Ow, you almost like broke my hand. Jesus.
Alex later defends bringing Simon as her standing up for gender equality, which I just thought was kind of funny. Simon is also quite the character. He's really into fashion and style, partly for himself, but more strongly for Alex. It comes off a bit like she's his life-size Barbie doll, but to me it's not really commodifying her, as he genuinely seems to love everything about her, though her looks are definitely included. He also has some more feminine qualities. He loves a girls' night, and all of this calls his sexuality into question, a relic of the show airing in 2008. But he definitely comes on strong and seems like the type of person you might have to be around for a while to truly understand and appreciate. We see this play out for Simon throughout his time as a spiritual housewife, but we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Moral of the story, the other women weren't that into Simon. Throughout the course of the season, the facade of their fabulosity begins to slip. Now, don't get me wrong, I think they hung the moon and always have been and always will be perfection, but the other ladies seem to see the two as glamorous and worldly and high society at first, but the aura shifts to an illusion as the season progresses, especially once Bethenny saw the state of the VanKempen's floors.
The house was just like a shambles. It was the non-acknowledgement of this going on and having a party at a house that looked like this. It's just strange.
Jill also took pause with the VanKempens vacationing in St. Bart's during the off-season. They all feel like the VanKempens are kind of phony, and by the reunion, it's clear that they've all turned on Alex. They see Alex as a social climber and ingenuine. They're especially weirded out by her saying that she hates going to the Hamptons as it feels like work and she's always worried about being on in case she has to impress someone. I can totally see this being off-putting. It comes off as opportunistic, and you would feel like she was using you for your connections or what you can give her, rather than genuinely wanting to be your friend. Alex and Simon, who joins her on stage at Housewives First, feel they were misrepresented, which none of the housewives seem to agree with. Interestingly, it's Bethenny who really defends the show in editing, saying that if they didn't like what they saw, they either need to change or accept themselves and not blame the show. This is kind of striking to watch in 2024, as she's recently launched her reality reckoning, taking a lot of issues with the mechanics of reality TV, but that's a story for another day. Another big issue that comes up at the reunion is that nude pictures of Alex have somehow leaked. She's a trailblazer, not caring a single iota about them being out there. She celebrates her body and doesn't see why she should be ashamed. Ramona, on the other hand, is horrified, storming off the set when the topic comes up. The other women kind of vary in terms of how they feel, but it seems like they just don't really want to be associated with her. I think the season 1 RHONY cast was one of the all-time greats. There are absolutely no duds, and everyone still gets talked about to varying degrees, but I think Alex and Simon were by far the most attention-grabbing. They were kind of cringy, but ultimately harmless, and so much fun to watch and discuss. So this takes us into era 2, settling in. We get right down to business, opening with Simon and Jill feuding in the press. It's clear that the rest of the ladies have turned on Alex. Jill and Bethenny, firmly in their bestie era, spend a lot of time talking shit about Silex, as B has officially coined them, and Ramona is actively avoiding them at social gatherings. It's seeming pretty socially grim for a girl. But in their solo scenes, Alex and Simon are delivering in spades. We get some incredible moments when the two take a trip to the Hamptons. Again, this is work for them, so they're not there to relax, but rather to schmooze. They stay at an absolutely iconic rickety old house, which comes with a spa experience and a tarot reading. These two are just so entertaining, like I could watch them do anything. They have this bit where they splash around on the beach in the Hamptons, and it's just gold. Simon feels self-conscious in his Speedo, as he's used to beaching in more Euro-minded settings, and they hate on the waves, which would scare young Johan. They much prefer the serene, clear waters in Australia and the Caribbean, where we learn Alex's parents have a house. Pretty early on, they make up with Jill, but Bethenny seems really fixated on getting Alex to admit she's mad that Jill was talking about her children, who at the season 1 finale party had been acting up. This will become important later, but I just wanted to plant the seed that it's on Alex's radar that people are talking about her children, and she doesn't like it one bit. She stays mostly silent on the subject for now. Their big personal journey for this season is renovating their townhouse. This leads to a lot of fun chaos and some great VanKempen content. Jill is also along for the ride. Remember that she and her husband Bobby own a fabric store, so she's helping them with the curtains and such. She's starting to form a real bond, especially with Simon, and I just love their chemistry together. She's really starting to make social inroads with Bethenny and Jill. We're seeing a bit of hesitation from the two. We get a whole bit of Bethenny making fun of her website, and Jill talks shit about their townhouse, but we're starting to see them, especially Bethenny, form a conscience about it. With Bethenny, Bethenny, we continue to see that she and Alex really connect when they're one-on-one. Alex is a really great listener and offers great advice. She can tell just by looking at Bethenny when she's upset. This is one of my favorite qualities about Alex, how genuinely kind-hearted and maternal she can be. We'll dive more into this later. But Bethenny seems almost surprised at how much she enjoys Alex when they're one-on-one, and she even asked for Alex's help in creating the logo for Bethenny's Skinny Girl empire. We've also been seeing Jill warm up to Simon. This was in the era when the show was really anchored by the feud between Jill and Ramona, and one of the biggest ways this feud manifested in the early days was through their heated tennis matches. Ramona's husband Mario is very good at tennis. He's like nationally ranked or something, so he wants to have a mixed doubles match with Jill and a partner of his choosing. Jill wants to make the choice herself. This spins off into a bunch of drama between Mario and Jill that's not really relevant to this video, but when Jill's tennis pro partner cancels last minute, Bethenny gets the grand idea to sub in Simon as her partner. The whole bit was to surprise Ramona and throw her off. Remember, Ramona despises Simon, but some rando ruins the surprise, which is a shame, but we do see this bit really strengthen the connection between Silex and Bill? Jolthany? I don't know, the Bethenny-Jill duo. It also allowed Alex and especially Simon to kind of lean into the joke of their silliness and how much Ramona despises them. And despise them, she does. Ramona, Mario, Alex, and Simon get into a couple's face-off, fittingly at a Page 6 event, with the reason being that Alex didn't give them the heads up that the naked pictures were going to leak. There are rumors that Avery, Ramona's daughter, had to leave the school she was at because of them, but it seems like the school just didn't really like that Ramona was on the show, and the nudes were just the nail in an already closing coffin. All of the NYC prep kids, a fellow Bravo show about kids in prep school in New York, which aired around this time, would also face grief with their New York City private schools, so I don't think it's fair to place the blame entirely on Alex. But this particular detail isn't mentioned on the show, so I don't really know. But Alex and Simon think it's a little hypocritical that Ramona and Mario are suddenly acting so prudish about Alex's pictures when Ramona is Ramona, and as Simon is keen to point out, she had kissed a woman who had posed for Playboy on the lips during season 1. He doesn't like that she's acting so holier than thou and religiously motivated when it comes to them, but not themselves. I think that's a fair point, but good point or not, Ramona spends most of the season avoiding the two. Simon finally confronts her about this during a fashion show where he's pleased to get to sit in the front row. Ramona just kind of unloads, saying he has no depth and is too feminine. It would be totally brutal for most people, but Simon just takes it in stride. And by the end of the season, Ramona has a weird turnaround. First eviscerating him for his red leather pants.
You're just like a tutu. Like a foo-foo. Tutu-foo-foo.
Then dancing the night away with him. My theory on this turnaround, besides of course Ramona loving having a new dancing partner, she loves to dance after all, is that Alex and Simon stopped caring about impressing her. They must have gotten a lot of backlash after the first season, and with the naked photos coming out, the negative words are not being liked by the quote-unquote right people, probably stopped meaning so much. And Ramona could probably sense this not caring anymore attitude. But whatever the cause, Ramona would become a key ally for Alex in her later seasons. We'll get to that shortly, but to wrap this era up, I think this was a good season for Alex to kind of settle a little bit. We still see some of the social climbery stuff, as with the Hamptons trip, but they seem to be finding their own identity. She gets outfitted for Fashion Week by a Brooklyn-based designer that's just getting their start. The show regularly juxtaposes a scene of Jill or Ramona doing something glamorous to the more shoddy version of the VanKempens, but I think this makes them all the more relatable. We watch these shows for the glamour and luxury, of course, but I like having the more aspiring figures on the show alongside that insane wealth to round things out. All in all, we saw Alex finding her place more on the show, bonding with Bethenny and Jill, showing a more grounded side as we got more of a glimpse into her professional life, and beginning to win the audience over as we started to see what a great friend she can be. So this takes us into season 3, which I'm officially calling her Scapegoat era. This is one of the greatest seasons of Real Housewives in my opinion, but kind of a weird season for Alex. And that weirdness is there from the start, as Ramona has suddenly decided to turn over a new leaf with Alex and decide she loves her and wants to be her bestie. Maybe some of this is residue from her dancing bond with Simon, but I think there was some strategery going on Ramona's part, as early on she was really leaning into this feud with Jill, and I think she thought Alex could be a good person to have on her side. This ends up not really sticking for the season, as the Bethenny and Jill fallout would end up taking center stage, but early on Ramona is like actively courting Alex as an ally. She invites her to a yacht party and is just all over her. She and Mario invite Alex and Simon on a couple's night, and once again, they're laying it on thick. This all culminates in the impossible decision of choosing between Ramona and Jill's warring brunches. Both are hosting a brunch and both expect Alex to be there. She attempts to do both, but Ramona and Mario guilt trip them into not going to Jill's, forcing her to kind of pick a side, but Jill gets the position Alex is in. I want to quickly lay out the social dynamics of this season because they're relevant to understand Alex's role. So Ramona and Jill are feuding, Luann and Mario, and so by extension Ramona, are feuding, and Bethenny would soon learn that Jill has had a fallout with her. Luann has now stepped in as Jill's new right-hand man, and the two are attempting to bring in Kelly, who they hated at the season 2 reunion, but now seemingly feel they need to scoop up as an ally. And Kelly and Bethenny are still on the outs after their batshit insane feud the season prior. So yeah, the whole social circle is a mess, but the one person who's good with everyone, of course, it's our main girl, Alex McCord. So our once pariah has now become the belle of the ball, as everyone wants her on their team. Alex is trying to play peacekeeper and not plan to flag firmly on the ground in any of these feuds, but this gets complicated when she takes umbrage with Luann and Jill joking about how out of control her children are. Apparently, Francois had been climbing up the leg of some guy Simon knew on the dock that day the women went on Ramona's True Renewal yacht, something she doesn't find funny, but Luann and Jill seemingly do. Remember that Alex had been holding on to her resentment over the women bashing her parenting in the past. Luann has also mocked her plans to write a book on parenting, though perhaps she was projecting, as literally everyone was mocking her plans to write Class with the Countess, a book on living with elegance and flair. So when they make these comments, and to be fair, they're just joking around, it's too much for Alex to handle. But instead of saying something in the moment, she lets it stew and fester. This makes her a prime candidate to be a listening ear to Bethenny as she vents about how Jill has been treating her in the wake of their fallout, which, yes, I will be covering soon. Hearing how Bethenny has been treated and ruminating on the kids comment has been really building up inside of Alex, and it all comes spewing out at Jill's Saks Fifth Avenue shopping event. Jill is kind of just stunned by the whole thing, but downplays her role in it, lobbing it off onto her bestie Luann, who happily takes the blame. They're kind of treating her like a child, like this had been such a big deal to Alex, and it clearly wasn't something they'd thought twice about. It's like that meme from Mad Men, the I don't think of you at all thing. It was just kind of brutal, and Alex immediately bursts into tears and breaks out into her signature hives. The women comfort her, and all seems to be good, but secretly Alex is still majorly harboring a resentment against Jill. Alex introduces the women to the world of alternative fashion when she asks the ladies join her on the planning committee for Brooklyn Fashion Week. End. We see her starting to experiment with speaking up in scenes, as during a planning session, literally everyone starts going at it, which is obviously very embarrassing, as this is, at least on the surface, a serious-ish meeting. The fashion show also leads to one of Ramona's most iconic moments, so we've got to thank Alex for setting all of this up. So here's where things get really interesting. So remember that Bethenny and Jill's feud is becoming the central through line of this season. Also remember that this is a time where big things are happening for Bethenny. She gets pregnant, engaged, Skinny Girl is starting to get off the ground. She's spending most of the season driving around in her Skinny Girl VW Bug.
I know, I saw you pull up with a Skinny Girl car.
Yeah.
It's hysterical.
Yeah, the skinny
You
girls.
drive that around town?
And to make things more complicated, her biological father, who she's never had much of a relationship with, is dying. Bethenny is like cracking and now doesn't have Jill to turn to, so Alex becomes her confidant. The two are getting genuinely close, and I can't help but think that Alex is such a better friend to have on the other end of these conversations than Jill would be. She's able to really listen to Bethenny and offer support and ask guiding questions, and it's just such an incredible thing to witness. I would seriously love to have Alex as my therapist. She's being a genuinely good friend to Bethenny, and we see that their bond is really strengthening. Alex ends up being the first cast member Bethenny tells that she's pregnant and engaged, which, as B points out, is absolutely insane compared to where everybody stood just the year prior. And despite being upset with Jill, Alex still wants what's best for Bethenny and tries to prod Jill into making up with her. At this point in their fallout, Jill was stubbornly digging her heels into the sand and not wanting to give Bethenny any real slack, so Alex tries to gently let her know that Bethenny's dad is very sick and it may be better just to move past her issues if she wants to salvage the friendship, a message Jill does not pick up on. Bethenny kind of snaps regarding Jill and loses all interest in making up with her and tells Alex that if she sees Jill at Ramona's True Renewal skin party, that she can pass along the message. And pass along the message, Alex certainly does.
There was no thinking. There was no breathing. I just said, yes, I'll do that.
This is really Alex's big turning point on the show. Up until now, she was kind of thought more like a little sister, someone who the other ladies didn't really want there at first, but eventually let her tag along as she seemed mostly harmless. But this is the moment that would shift that paradigm. So the group is gathered, Bethenny isn't there, but sends a card saying she will drink to Ramona's success in 7 months, confirming what Perez Hilton had already leaked, that she was pregnant. The group is mostly in high spirits. Alex is laughing, Jill's laughing, everyone's laughing. They're all gathered in a circle, and Alex lets Jill know that she has a message to deliver from Bethenny. The group thinks Bethenny should be the one to deliver the message herself, but spirits are still high. They're not realizing the intensity that's brewing. Alex starts getting exasperated, she's breaking out in hives. This should have been a clue that this was a serious message, but again, the women still think of Alex as a benign pawn on the chessboard that has become the Real Housewives of New York. But pawns can be powerful, and Grandmaster Bethenny has her pawn deliver the ultimate checkmate.
All right, the message from Bethenny to Jill is that you and she are done and she never wants to see you ever again or talk to you.
That's not a nice That's creepy. I don't like creepy. Okay,
This absolutely stuns the group. Nobody knows what to say besides Kelly Bensimon, who of course thinks it's creepy.
That's the creepiest thing ever.
Jill feels like Alex threw a drink in her face. She was totally off guard, and this totally severs the relationship between the two. Even Ramona is like, Alex, what was that? And Alex herself admits that it was an absolutely terrible way to deliver the message, but she doesn't regret doing so. She knew it would change the relationship, and that's why she did it. This moment really changes Alex's status in the group, as she has very, very clearly chosen a side, and Jill spends the rest of the season using Alex as a scapegoat for nearly all of her problems. While I get that Alex chose the most humiliating way to break the news to Jill, and of course she'd be rightfully upset, Jill spends the rest of the season painting Alex as this evil person and cannot see that her own actions led to this. Alex is very forthright in knowing that while the message was technically from Bethenny, she delivered it the way that she did out of the buildup of anger of Jill constantly belittling and disrespecting her, her husband, her children, and her home for 3 years. She'd had enough, so when the opportunity arose to be Bethenny's proxy, she took the job with glee. I think this is one of those things that makes her relatable. In Housewives' world, it's more common to be confrontational and speak up the moment that someone upsets you, sometimes to the point where it comes off like the women are creating issues simply so that it can become drama. But I think in the realm outside of Housewives, most of us are more like Alex, not immediately speaking up, but letting things build up until we kind of just snap. I know I've done it, and I've borne witness to it happening with others. And Jill was also being such a monster this season, in my opinion, that it was kind of satisfying to see her stunned into silence by Alex. But Jill really spends the rest of the season hating on Alex, trying to paint her out as this evil person, which was kind of ridiculous. Luann and Kelly are there to wipe away her "I'm the victim" tears, but I think Jill has totally worn everyone else down. Alex doesn't cave into Jill's theatrics and takes pride in finally having stood up to her. But it also means that there's some sort of altercation every time they see each other going forward, one of which leads to one of my favorite lines in the Housewives canon.
You are in high school. You are a mean girl, and you are in high school. And while you are in high school, I am in Brooklyn trying to survive in this economy, working.
The situation has also really bonded her and Bethenny. Bethenny respects Alex's aggressive act and is elated that she didn't have to tell Jill that they were through herself. They seem to have achieved a level of comfort with each other that seems less like show friends and more like actual friends. This is good for Bethenny to have a real true connection, as her father sadly passes away right as they are set to go on their cast trip, the infamous Scary Island, where Kelly seemingly has a psychotic episode. This trip is so iconic that even though I covered it early on in my vow renewals video, I kind of want to give it a whole video of its own, so let me know if that's something you're interested in. But let's hit the high points as they relate to Alex. First, she and Bethenny continue to grow closer. There's a funny scene where the two laugh about Kelly's weird behavior at lunch while they're on the yacht. That's one of my favorite scenes in Housewives history.
What was that?
What was that?
I don't know why I love it so much. I think it's just such a genuine moment of connection and laughter. Maybe it's just because I love Alex and this version of Bethenny so much, but it's just one that makes me smile. She also goes out for turtle time with Ramona.
Turtle time.
The two have really maintained their bond throughout the season, and even though Sonja has entered the picture and has become Ramona's number 1, Alex is pretty solidly her number 2. With Kelly, we first had the iconic Johan face photo shoot.
Johan face. Johan face, Alex.
Which leads to Kelly saying Alex looked like she was channeling a vampire during the shoot. She's targeted for a period during the go-to-sleep dinner and seems to be one of the ones who clues in early that this isn't just Kelly being dramatic, it's something a lot deeper. And her last big moment was, of course, her reaction to Jill Zarin crashing the trip.
And there's been enough drama.
This is where we really saw just how close she and Ramona had gotten. If you remember, Jill had said that she wasn't going on the trip, only to show up on the last day while the women are still reeling from the Kelly incident. Alex is actively breaking out into hives and hyperventilating over the whole thing, and Ramona and Sonja are very attentive to her emotional response. Ramona straight up says that the reason she wants Jill to leave is because her presence is so upsetting to Alex, which of course enrages Jill to no end. She ends the season proud of herself for really finding her voice and saying the things she was thinking and accepting the consequences that came with it. This season was such a change for Alex, but I think that it makes sense as it was such a turning point for the show. We had a lot of movement with the depth of the feud between Jill and Bethenny, the course change Luann took, going from the Countess, wife of the Count, to the Countess, pop star and woman about town. We had the Scary Island and have the introduction of Sonja Morgan, who added her own brand of chaos, so some of the things that were relied upon more for entertainment in past seasons fell by the wayside. I think this was kind of to Alex's detriment in a way, because some of the things that made her stand out, the Brooklyn of it all, being a mother to young children, and of course Simon, were featured less prominently. This was really Simon's most demure season. We hardly saw him compared to what we got in the early days. But it also has some of Alex's most memorable moments, and it was definitely with this season that she became a vital and accepted member of the group, rather than this wacky character the other women were forced to interact with. I think she probably also created a lot of fan favor this season, as she definitely picked the winning team in the Bethenny vs. Jill feud. I don't know if this was editing skew or what, but this season really had Jill at her worst and Bethenny at her best. So Alex so clearly and aggressively picking Team B was absolutely the right call. I think you'd have to be a Jill stan or a committed contrarian to be on Jill's side in the whole thing, so I'm sure a lot of fans were feeling satisfied seeing Alex tell her that she's a mean girl who's in high school. She was the voice of the people.
Oddly enough.
This leads into our next era, which I'm coining Blonde Ambition. This is sadly the last we'd see of her on the show. The big news coming into this season is that Bethenny had left the show, going off into her spin-off era. In her place, we've got the absolute dynamo that is Cindy Barshop. I'm kidding, but if for some reason you want Cindy Barshop analysis, watch my vid on the 5 worst one-season wonders. There's not really going to be a lot of Cindy talk here because the two hardly interact. The big change for Alex is that she's begun a modeling career.
It's not like, ooh, I'm a model. It's actually, I'm modeling and we're going to make money at this and it's going to be a business.
She's committed to making it a career, and we see her making some real moves this season, walking in a bunch of shows and doing photo shoots. She goes to one of Ramona's events with her hair still done from a photo shoot, which creates quite a bit of buzz.
What's with the hair? Sometimes like it was your finger in electroshock.
Socially, things start off a bit rocky. She's on the board of the Marriage Equality Act and is helping plan an event where people wear wedding dresses and walk along the Brooklyn Bridge. This sparks controversy with Sonja, who has been asked to serve as the Grand Marshal of the event and decides that nobody else can speak at the event or else she's dropping out. Alex is annoyed as she actually knows what she's talking about.
Same-sex marriage should also be equal.
Legal. Yes, equal too, but legal. Legal. We need it to be legal.
And Sonja's more just there for the vibes.
Love.
The other women feel that Alex is being kind of preachy about the whole thing, but I think she's right to want this subject to be treated with respect. This turns into a spectacle at the march itself, carrying over into a few more parties where she and Sonja get into it a bit, but the two eventually make up and get close again. Alex and Ramona have maintained their bond. We actually see them hanging out with their husbands in tow somewhat frequently this season. Ramona also is warming up to Brooklyn, a place she previously looked at with disgust on account of spending more time with Alex. These friendships with Ramona and Sonja lead to the three becoming kind of an alliance of blondes, warring against the darker-haired members of the cast, Luann, Jill, Kelly, and Cindy. This is so stark that they all travel separately to their cast trip to Morocco. Within the blondes, it's clear that Alex is the third wheel. She doesn't always agree with their choices or what they have to say, but they're her best option for friends, so she goes with it. With Jill, things start rocky. Jill's still reeling from the whole Bethenny thing, but lucky for Alex, Jill spends the first quarter of the season in Australia away from the cameras, which seems like terrible timing, but whatever. When she returns, the two agree to move forward from their past issues, having a genuinely mature discussion and performing a ritual of writing down their issues and burning them in an effort to leave the conflict behind. This really does seem to work, and they're mostly good for the rest of the season, although a spat between Jill and Simon pops up over Simon's antics on Twitter, though this also eventually gets resolved. Her real big issue this season is with the Countess. Luann has been down on Alex since late in season 1, but there hasn't been much active combat between the two until this season. Luann seems to feel disgust towards Alex. I feel like the roots are first and are feeling like she really is high society and doesn't like Alex coming off as a social climber, and second, her allegiance towards Jill. She was very down on Alex's message delivery last season and was involved in mocking Alex's kids' behavior, and though Jill took the brunt of Alex's rage about the whole thing, Alex was still down on Lou. It's mostly behind the back issues at the start of the season, but things deteriorate between the two when the ladies take a trip to Morocco. Ramona and Jill's feud has flared back up, and a psychic has just told Ramona that her husband is cheating on her, so Alex is in full protect Ramona mode.
You go get the Pinot Grigio.
She needs a glass. Let's go.
Pinot Grigio right away.
Luann tries to involve herself in the comfort sesh, but it's kind of a blondes only thing, so Alex decides that the best way to handle it is to once again act as a messenger for her friend. Again, she feels no regret over the Jill thing last season, so she decides to go barreling in during a henna session to tell Luann that they need to talk.
What is that? Is that a buffalo coming down the stairs?
This goes absolutely abysmally, with Kelly giving her performance notes.
Looks weird.
What are you trying to do here?
create anything. Looks weird.
Yes, you are.
Weird. That was weird.
I'm not trying to create anything.
It looks weird, Alex. It didn't look normal. Come on.
I'm
do
sorry
it.
if it looked weird.
Re-enter.
No.
And Luann just totally blowing her off, which Alex does not react to well. The feud continues back in New York with an absolutely iconic sit-down. They come to the conclusion that they're just not compatible as friends. They've always been more on the periphery from each other and haven't really connected since they initially met. This scene has always been memorable for some of its iconic lines.
And you came in your Herman Munster shoes.
They're Louis Vuitton shoes, you know?
Well, even Louis Vuitton makes mistakes.
But in watching it back, it made me kind of sad that this was Alex's last season, as something really interesting was brewing between Alex and Luann. Alex makes it clear that she has Luann's number and has really learned what buttons of Luann's to push, so it sucks that we didn't get to see this evolve, as I think this could have become pretty major. Luann continues to talk shit about Alex to this day, so I think their negative feelings towards each other were very real, and it could have been a big focus going forward. They play off of each other really well, and Luann's trajectory really took some turns, so it would have been fun to watch Alex's commentary on some of Luann's later evolutions. But we do know about how she feels about Luann's career as a pop star, which is that she doesn't like it. She supports Luann chasing her dreams, but takes issue with the content of Luann's songs. She, along with Ramona and Sonja, refused to be in her Chic C'est La Vie music video, with Alex's reasoning being that she hates Luann talking about class.
Oh, you can't. Don't even say the C word. Don't say the C word.
I also have a huge problem with the word CLASS. It's something you don't say. You just don't say it. I would rather say see you next Tuesday.
That word's not an okay word to use.
She finds the whole thing crass, and through discussing the subject, we found out that Alex actually lived a very privileged life growing up. We gotten some clues about this throughout her time on the show, but it was kind of a record scratch moment compared to the story that was packaged in her first season. It made me wonder about character building on these shows. Like, did she need to be packaged as a small town girl to better build this image of her and Simon as these shameless social climbers? I don't know, it was just kind of striking to me when this was revealed, given her original branding. But after this season, Alex would end up not returning.
McCord, fired!
Season 4 wasn't that great compared to the first 3 seasons, so it seemed that the network wanted to make a stark change, and along with Alex, Jill, Kelly, and Cindy all left the show.
Kelly Bensimon, fired! Jill Zarin, fired! Cindy Barshop, fired!
To be replaced with Carol Radziwill, Heather Thompson, and Aviva Drescher. I think we missed out on not getting to see Alex and Aviva interact, especially if it was a fight, as the anxiety levels would have been just through the roof. And I think she and Carol could have gotten on really well. But for her own firing, I think she kind of just lost a place on the show. She was close with Ramona and Sonja, but I think producers were really seeing what a fun duo they were, and Alex didn't add too much to the dynamic, and didn't really fit in with them when they were in full over-the-top mode. As mentioned, I would have liked to see the feud between Alex and Luann continue on, but I think it just wasn't enough to have her survive the Great Chop. Which takes us to our next era, 1A in a Pod, which is in reference to her hosting a YouTube show where, much like Teddy Mellencamp and Tamra Judge do on their podcast, 2T's in a Pod, Alex spilled a lot of behind-the-scenes info about filming a Housewives show.
Whatever you've got going on, as soon as you are given the dates, boom, goodbye. You have to completely stop your life for the week or 10 days or however long it is that you go away to film the trip.
I'll link some of them in the description of this video if you want to watch, but they're a fun trip down the rabbit hole of what goes on behind the scenes of these shows. She'd give her take on where production may be interfering and give her thoughts on the currently airing season and predictions for what was to come. As far as I know, this was the first instance of this behind the scenes look from a former housewife, the first time we've got to really see what went on behind that fourth wall. She also went on marriage boot camp with Simon at some point. So while Alex was off Housewives, there were other ways for us McCordians to get our fix. But we slowly crept into era 6, dark mode. Alex and Simon left Brooklyn at some point, moving to Simon's home country of Australia. Through the bits and pieces we'd hear on social media, we found out that Simon pursued a law degree and Alex pursued a psychology degree. We did get a pop-up. She was on an episode of Watch What Happens Live with Ramona in 2017, and there'd sometimes be chatter on social media that Luann had shaded her in one of her cabaret shows, but aside from that, we didn't get too much info on where she was at. Slowly, as newer fans came to the show, and older fans began glorifying older seasons with a tinge of nostalgia, an army of Alex McCord fans began to rise. There were demands for the RHONY ladies to take a trip to Australia and visit her. When Ultimate Girls Trip came into the mix, especially with the second season of Ex-Housewives, the fan cries grew louder. We wanted Alex. And finally, one day in early January of 2023, the rumor mill began swirling that our prayer had been answered. Some of the bigger Bravo accounts began leaking that season 4 of Ultimate Girls Trip had been cast, and the name that was getting the most attention was our cult classic, Miss Alex McCord. Bravo finally confirmed the news, telling us that the ladies were going to Morocco, and the internet collectively lost its mind. Alex seemed to be excited too, asking for our help in preparing, as every day leading up to the trip, she asked the public for the lowdown on each of her soon-to-be castmates. It was adorable. Our excitement grew as filming started and pictures began leaking. But along with the pictures, so too leaked rumors that the trip had ended early for cast member Brandi Glanville and Caroline Manzo, with reports coming out that the two had gotten into some explosive fight. Slowly, a picture began to emerge that it was actually a sexual assault type of situation, which was obviously very alarming but confusing. Nobody really knew the full story, and I don't want to super get into what allegedly happened, but as time passed, the situation became legal in nature, and reports started to swirl that we might never see this season. These were initially shot down by higher-ups at the network, but when they flipped the schedule to first air the RHONY Legacy edition, which was filmed after the Morocco edition and sadly did not feature Alex, the alarm bells around the situation began to grow. And that's kind of where we stand now as I'm writing this in early 2024. As of now, it's very unclear if we'll ever get to see this new era of Alex. As I learn more about the situation, I'm not really seeing how they could air the season, so we may always be left to wonder about this lost Alex footage. Maybe there will be a way to put her on some other season. My fingers are crossed. Which takes us to our last bit, where I want to discuss why I think Alex has taken on this cult-like status in the Real Housewives fandom. First, I think nostalgia. Alex and Simon were such a heavy focus in those early seasons of RHONY, and her exit, along with Jill and Kelly, launched the show into a new era. Even though what was to come was great, probably even better than the earlier seasons, I think people still look back at what was with glittery eyes, and Alex is a huge representative of that era. Second, the brand of drama she created was fun and lighthearted. She and Simon were easy marks to hate on in those early days with their social climbing ways, so they were easy to judge without getting too mean-spirited. I think fans kind of like shading the housewives in a perverse type of way, and Alex and Simon gave a lot of fodder to soothe this instinct. And Alex herself wasn't mean-spirited, so unless you personally are Jill Zarin, it never felt icky to watch her in fights. So even if you didn't like Alex and Simon, it was a love to hate rather than a hate to hate situation. She never went too low. Third, I think some of her quirks are what made her relatable to the audience. In Housewives world, it's normal to not break a sweat when you're in a high-intensity fight with another, but in the real world, that's not the norm. Most people are uncomfortable when they're having this level of drama, like Alex was. We'd regularly see her break into hives and turn red during conflict, which I think is generally the more common response in moments of this intensity. She was also just a generally quirky person, sometimes a little bit awkward, which I'm sure most of us can relate to. Plus, as her time on the show progressed, we saw a really maternal, sweet side to her. She could be a really, really good friend when she got to know the ladies, so it's no wonder to me that she went into the field of psychology post-Housewives. She just brought a really different vibe to the show and fits an archetype not typically seen on Housewives. And last, the Simon of it all. Nobody can deny how into each other Alex and Simon were, and I think in our heart of hearts, we all want a Silex-style love story. While they may have come off codependent at first, I think we all learned that it wasn't a need to be together, but rather a want. They genuinely love each other's company and find things more fun when they do it together. What more could anyone want? But regarding her cult classic status, I think maybe Alex came off as kind of uncool at first, especially compared to her castmates like the literal Countess Luann, who had some quality that made everyone around her crumble in deference to her title and quote-unquote high status. Or Bethenny, confident, hilarious, and driven. As we got to know B and Lou over their many, many seasons on the show, we saw that there were layers upon layers within them, and a lot of the facade they built in their first season would eventually crumble, but with Alex, we saw her yearning right away. She was open about not being where she ultimately wanted to be yet, and maybe in seeing her in this cocoon type of phase, we balked at her trying. But as we got to know Alex over her 4 seasons, we saw that she was so much more than someone who wants to be photographed. We saw her heart and her sensitivity. We got to tag along as she increasingly found her voice and legs to stand on as she spoke up against the people who put her down. She stood in her discomfort, which is not an easy thing to do, especially when your body betrays you by breaking out in hives. Yet, she continued to show up and keep speaking her mind. Alex doesn't fit the mold of a typical housewife. She's offbeat, and in watching her, maybe some of us see our own offbeat tendencies by relating to her. She's a bit of a weirdo, but so am I, and maybe you are too. Maybe this is just my singular perspective, but I think in the 2000s, weirdness wasn't as embraced as it started to be in the 2010s and 20s. There was much more of a pressure to fit in than there is today. So, where she may have made the audience uncomfortable by standing out in the past, I think general society has evolved enough to celebrate her kookiness and see her inner radiance shine through. With the rise of social media and the ability to express yourself on a level never previously possible, I think it's only gotten easier to see that others are weird like you and that it's okay to accept yourself as you are. People just may like you for it. And to me, Alex very much embodies this. She may have seemed kind of off-putting or strange at first, but she's one of the best friends we've seen on RHONY. She's supportive, a great listener, and genuinely caring. She goes above and beyond for her friends. Plus, she's absolutely winning this life that she's carved out for herself. By all accounts, she's madly in love with someone who would move heaven and earth for her, has 2 sons she seems to love with all of her heart, and has an amazing positive career she's passionate about. What's more cool than that? So while people may not have seen all that Alex had to offer in 2008, I think in 2024, it's difficult not to see her as an absolute gem. So yeah, Alex was just a really fun housewife. Hopefully we'll one day get to see her time on Ultimate Girls Trip, but if not, I hope that Bravo saw how excited people were to have her back and find another place for her. So let me know all of your thoughts on Alex. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can always find me on TikTok, Twitter, or Instagram at DeeplySuperFish. But I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye!